What's up, everybody? Keith Sanchez, Damian, Parson, Ryan Fowler from the Draft Network. Fellas, a conversation to be had is how to project the wide receiver position. Big guys, small guys, we got them all in this draft class. The Quentin Johnsons of the world. Then you got guys like Dontavian Wicks from Virginia. You got Tank Dell from Houston. Jordan Addison, maybe wide receiver 1 for some teams' boards in this draft. How can we project those guys? Comparing guys like Tank and Jordan, Keith.
Yeah, I think we need to have the conversation about Jordan Addison, right? Because we've seen Jordan Addison weigh in height, weight. I think when he was sub 6 foot, 4.55, 40, 175 pounds. So are we really ready to project this guy as the number 1 wide receiver in this class? Because we're talking about a guy that's 175 pounds that initially ran a 4 or 5, right? So you're not talking about elite speed, you're not talking about elite weight, you're not talking about elite separation skills. And I think it was based off of productivity, right? And that's fine, that's cool, right? You talk about a round 2 wide receiver productivity, but when you're talking about being a top 15 pick, I think that's really tough. And Ryan, I know you mentioned it when we were watching Jordan Addison run, and it kind of brought up the smaller wide receiver conversation, which is the conversation that needs to be had. So I want to ask you your opinion on, where are you with these smaller wide receivers and how they project in this class?
Yeah, I think it goes past the years past, right? We think of smaller guys and you just throw them in the slot and hope it works. That's not really the NFL. You need guys that can play in the slot, you guys that can play outside. And I think of a guy like Tank Dell. I was a fan of Calvin Austin last year. Obviously, we're going to see in Pittsburgh his redshirt year, if you will, in Pittsburgh. Tank Dell is one of the elite separators in this class. If you're 5'1", it matters. But just because you got the Houston logo on your head, look at the player, right? Don't look at the logo on his helmet. The kid can ball, and he can separate with any receiver in this class. So I just try to microscope the player of who they are. We saw Tank absolutely dominate down at the Senior Bowl. We saw Calvin last year dominate at the Senior Bowl. So for me, if you can play ball, you can play ball. And there's not a team in this league that doesn't want a guy in their team that can't separate. Damian, your thoughts?
I think the big thing is, when in terms of projecting these guys, is understanding how to use them, right? And be willing to. As an NFL coach, scouts are going to bring you these players that once they give them to you, it's your job to get the best out of them. So, yes, I'm not going to ask a DK Metcalf to be Julian Edelman and run options route. I'm not going to ask Tank Dell at 5'8", 166 pounds to go catch 50-50 balls in the red zone as an X wide receiver. Understand what their skill set is, what their strengths are, and use them to that. It's too many times we see these guys and people use Calvin Austin when they want to discredit Tank, and it's like, well, he was hurt. Right. Like as a rookie, like you said, red shirt, because he was hurt. So what do? You look at it. Cooper Kupp is not an explosive receiver, right? Doesn't check all the height, weight type of boxes, but Sean McVay's like, I know how to free him up. I want to stack him, bunch him, and do all the different things, give him free releases. Just be more willing and be more fluid as a play caller and the play designer when you have these dynamic, smaller receivers. Gadget is not a bad term anymore, and neither is slot, Keith.
Yeah, so I think this conversation, bringing it back to Jordan Addison, right, this becomes a this or that conversation. Meaning this, do you want to spend that first-round pick, potentially top 20 pick on Jordan Addison, or do you want Josh Downs in a second? Do you want Jaden Reed? Do you want Rakim Jarrett? Do you want Marvin Mims, who just ran a 4.3? So I think that's the conversation now, right? Because Jordan Addison, we expected as wide receiver 1 for you to come out here and kind of blaze the trail, right? For you to perform really well, show everybody why you're wide receiver 1, but instead you kind of mixed yourself back in with the rest of those guys. So I think for me, moving forward, as we evaluate this draft board, as we get closer to draft day, it's going to be a this or that type situation, and I'm going to really have to dive back into the film to see how I feel about Jordan Addison with his standing.
Jordan Addison, instead of running away from everybody, he ran back to them.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You know what I mean? You don't want to do, at this type of event, you don't want to do that because you don't separate yourself when you come out here and you weigh less than what people expect. You're shorter than people expect, and you run slower than people expect. He's a really good route runner, but we watched the tape and we've seen bigger receivers who are not as dynamic stay in his hip pocket when they get in press coverage, and that concerned me. Anytime he was touched, they got control of him, and it's like, okay, how do I need to be creative with you too? And if that's the case, how can I say that's wide receiver 1 if I have to do all these specific things? But I'm not going to knock you the way I knock some other smaller receivers I have to do similar things for. So I think that's what the biggest piece of projecting is, just understanding what the player is, how we're going to use them. And it's like, well, like you said, this or that. Do I want to take Jordan Addison in the first, or can I just wait till the second to get Josh Downs and have a guy that's 5'10", runs 4.48, and jumps nearly 40 inches? I know he could play the ball in the air.
Yeah, another talking point. Who is Matt Landers? Matt Landers in Indianapolis was outstanding, right? Guy from Arkansas, transfer from Georgia, 6'4", 200 pounds, comes out and runs a 4.3. Right? And who is Matt Landers? Right? Who is Matt Landers?
Ryan, I'm going to ask you as our resident scout, who is Matt Landers? Because I know you know.
Look, Matt Landers is a big physical athlete that participated in the Shrine Bowl and is someone that is a riser in this class. And you come out here in Indy and you run 4.37. We know guys that run fast and that are big, they go high, right? You don't sit on draft boards long unless you're a corner named Tariq Woolen last year that the NFL got cued on. Can't do that again. We can't be doing that, fellas. So Matt Landers, I think, is a guy that you're looking for that if you're a team at the top, we talked about the wide receiver 1 conversation in Jordan Addison. We saw Quentin Johnson work out today. We didn't see him run, saw him jump, but Matt Landers, maybe you could wait till day 3. You want a bigger guy, right? There's some limitations with Quentin, some things in the air they need to do better. Matt Landers is kind of that same guy. You want to wait, again, until day 3 and get that elite athlete and a guy that you want to get in your wide receivers room to be maybe a guy inside the red area from day 1 as a red zone threat to just work and be a project. He's not going to be wide receiver 1. He's not going to be a top 100 pick most likely. But someone that's a project, Matt Landers, 6'4", 4.37, fellas, those guys don't last long on boards.
They don't grow on trees either. You know what I mean? So you think about, use the term this or that, just a moment ago, and it's like you brought up Tariq Woolen. Well, the Jets could have had someone else at that first round pick. Don't get me wrong, Sauce was defensive player of the year, so it worked out, but you could have got even better ball production from a Tariq Woolen that went 5th round. So you could have this or that situation. And I'll ask you guys, is that what we see with Landers and QJ? Who is my wide receiver 1 coming into the week, but another 6'4" guy. He's actually taller than Quentin Johnston. Absolutely. He tested here, and that, like you said, 4.37, 4.38, what have you. Is that one of those situations where we're looking at it fast forward from a year as rookies? It's like, man, you could have gotten Landers in the 5th instead of taking QJ in the 1st.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had, right? You fall in a certain offense, right? You get with a good quarterback and a good offensive coordinator. We talked about a little bit with the shorter guys and scheming guys open. Some guys like Matt Landers, there are limitations in his game, but you get targets, you get more snaps. A guy that was at Arkansas wasn't crazy productive, but led the Razorbacks in multiple categories as a receiver. Moving forward into year 1 in the NFL, who knows what this guy could be? He's going to be a team's going to take a flyer on. Absolutely. Keith?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you plan on using Quentin Johnson, right? Like if you're only drafting Quentin Johnson to be a vertical threat type wide receiver because he has long strides to take the top off, then you should reevaluate and say, okay, then I could get a Matt Landers in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, something like that, right? But how I feel about Quentin Johnson, I think he's more versatile than that as a weapon. So that would be my thing. If you're drafting Quentin Johnson solely to be a vertical threat, then yes, definitely turn your attention to Matt Landers because you'll get more value for your pick.
Let's just keep Landers away from Kansas City.
That, and also, don't be misconstrued here. We're not comparing Matt Landers to Quentin Johnson now, but they're athletes and a guy that stood out here in Indianapolis that deserves more attention. So for Keith Sanchez, Damian Parson, Ryan Fowler from the Draft Network, the receivers are going to be an interesting conversation. Wide receiver 1, fellas, is still up in the air. Who's going to be wide receiver 1 off the board as a question to be answered as we move down the road. Make sure you keep it locked to the Draft Network all spring long as we move forward towards the NFL Draft.